Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Success Insight podcast. Our guest today is Patricia Love. Now, Patricia is returning to Success Insight as we continue to unpack her book, Seen and Unheard, A Little Girl's Journey from Silence to Empowerment. And as you'll recall, Patricia is also a women's empowerment coach. In Seen and Unheard, Patricia courageously shares how she successfully navigated a life of mental abandonment, abuse, and trauma, and ultimately found her power and worth within in order to create a new story. Patricia, welcome back to the Success Insight podcast.
Thanks, Howard. It's just a pleasure to be here. Every single time I come here, I just enjoy it more and more.
Well, I've noticed too, when you come back on the podcast, the energy level just kind of goes up, which I appreciate that.
I hope that's a good thing.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. I mean, it's, we get up in the morning, we go about our work and, we're doing this, we're doing that. And a lot of people don't realize, with the podcast for myself and even my guests, we have to be up because we want the best possible show.
Of course.
I want a good product. I want them to really appreciate the story you're sharing. And you have to come across as somebody who's like, I want to learn more about Patricia. So this is a win-win situation for both of us.
Well, I love it. Glad I can partake in bringing some energy to your podcast. I enjoy it. And so, for me, when I enjoy something, like anybody, right? When you enjoy something, it makes it a little bit easier.
It's always easier. And I do want to share a congratulations to you. I know your book has officially been published. So
yes,
by the time this episode drops in, middle of May, you will be on the way towards fame and good fortune with Seen and Unheard. And I think it's just a wonderful message. And I love how you've been able to share your journey, but in a way that people can kind of take that information, especially women can take that information and really begin to make some of those steps their own in their own way. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Howard. I appreciate doing this because I also believe that it's important for young girls and women to know that and understand that they do have a voice, even though maybe their voice was taken away from them a long time ago, or even when they were growing up like mine was in my book, Seen and Unheard. I tried to kind of go over some of those stories about what happened to me. And hopefully a lot of women and even teenage girls potentially will be able to relate to it, maybe reflect on some of it and help them move forward, which is really what I want, is just helping them to see that they can change and the such. Today, I'm pretty excited too, because we're kind of going into something I think is important for when people actually want to change and do things, is what I call is no more excuses, but it's accountability. And I think that a lot of people in life have a tendency, and I was one of them. Let me just be clear with this. I was one of those that really wasn't taking accountability for my own life. And I was always expecting other people to take care of things, or I was basically playing a victim. A victim is just somebody that always wants to blame somebody else, right?
Right.
And you don't want to take any accountability. It's so important to take accountability.
There's a psychology scholar, and we learned about this when I was going through coach training. And there's the victim, the villain, and the hero. And some people call it like the trickster's triangle, but for some, it's just so easy to play that victim. And you can see that playing out even with adults and some of the folks we coach, and they don't realize they're doing it in some ways.
Yeah, well, some realize they're doing it, and some people don't realize they're doing it. Some people it becomes such a way of life that they don't know any other way. And so what do we always say? Like
exactly,
yeah. And so what we've talked about in other episodes is that they wonder why they keep getting the same results that they're getting, because they keep playing the same record over and over again. And that's playing the victim and not acknowledging, and they're not taking accountability for anything they do. So the easiest way for them, because they don't want to take accountability, is to blame everything else, a situation, another person. Like a lot of times when people get divorced, they always want to blame the other person, when in reality, typically there's two people involved, and typically it's pretty even, Stephen. It's just a lot of people just don't want to take the time, or they don't want to know and be accountable for maybe what their real truth is.
Yeah.
And that's what's interesting.
So how do you help women, young girls change that message of playing the victim? As you said, it becomes comfortable, becomes second nature. Some realize this is what they're doing, some don't.
Right.
But how do you help them change that dynamic?
I was, again, playing the victim and not holding myself accountable. So where does that stop? Where it stops is obviously with you when you are ready to say, I can't do this anymore this way. I need to change something. And then you have to decide, okay, what do I need to change? And that's where the awareness comes in. That's when acknowledging that maybe just, I may have to look at myself to see if I have something to do with this issue. And most people don't always understand is that that's usually where it all lies, is right within us. So we can't change other people, right? I mean, how many times I know in my own past, I've tried to change others.
It's impossible.
But it's impossible. It doesn't work, but that doesn't stop people from trying to change people, right? If you learn to be aware and acknowledge that, okay, I can't change them, so let me change myself. You really have to become aware of this and be willing to change something because you don't like what's going on. So you have to be willing to look at yourself.
So I want to press just a little bit more. How do you help somebody in your work, or maybe it's other folks' work that we can draw upon, but unless there's a major event in your life, I mean, you had a major event in your life, does it have to be to that extreme, or is there a continuum? Because at some point, again, if they're playing the same tune over and over again, they might know they need to, but they don't. But something has to be introduced in this equation to kind of churn up the water a bit.
The main thing is that I have to drive into them is that they need to be willing to be open, and they have to be willing to listen, and they have to be willing to potentially make a change because of what's not working. Because you have to absolutely take a look at yourself, because I say this a lot, I can lead them to the trough, but I cannot make them drink. So what I can do is to say, look at some of these things that you've been doing, like, for instance, maybe you've been having a relationship, okay, but you don't seem to be able to hang on to a relationship. And the first thing you do is like, well, he was this way and he was that way. And so, and he, I don't know why he broke up with me. When I get to that point where they say, I don't know why, I say, wait a minute, let's stop there. Let's talk about that person. Let's talk about you. Could you possibly have had something that maybe that you said or did? And they think about these things. It's getting them to think. And it's really making them, and again, we always are saying this, the word stop and pause, but it's getting them to stop and listen to what they are saying to themselves internally. So what I do is, this is the hardest part, or one of the hardest parts, is getting them to acknowledge that they may have done something to affect their situation.
I have a coaching acquaintance. I mean, she's a relatively famous acquaintance. I know her through my own mentor. And she writes in her book, when we're playing the victim, this person, they're always wrong. It's this, it's that. And this is why things fail. Is it 100% of the time? Is it 90% of the time? Is it 80% of the time?
Right.
Well, maybe not 100% of the time.
Right.
Maybe it was 90% of the time. I'll give you that. 90% of the time it was because of that person. So the other 10%, is that you?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. You definitely have to have them understand that they could have a small part in it.
Yes.
And it just takes time. And this is why coaching is not a one-time deal, because it's that 10% that they go, oh yeah, that was probably, I probably had 10% to do with it. And then the next time I might speak that, well, I've been thinking about it. I might have had like 20 or 25%. And it's really, again, opening and becoming vulnerable. But that takes time to open up. So you can't just, I don't just tell somebody, well, you're wrong, even though sometimes we like to do that, right? Because I know that I would not have listened to those things. In fact, I know I did not listen. And that's one of the reasons it took me so long, because I was not willing to be open or vulnerable and listen maybe to other people, even though they were directing it to me, until I was willing to say, I may have some part in this. Now, whether it's 10% or 95%, doesn't matter. You have to be willing. So when you're coaching, you need to start having them talk about what the different avenues have been and what has gotten them there. So then we chat about that. And then they start realizing themselves that, well, maybe I need to work on this. And then we start breaking things down. And, but we have to get through that barrier, which is not an easy barrier to get through.
No doubt. Now, in Seen and Unheard, what types of exercises are you sharing with the reader that they can begin that journey of removing those barriers, answering those questions, beginning to introduce some accountability into their own choices they're making?
Once we kind of get to that acknowledgement that I might have some accountability here, I actually might have done something, we go a little bit deeper, then that's really, it's an area you get into that in some ways, when you realize that maybe you've done 50% or 40% of something, and now you have got to admit to yourself that I'm not so perfect. Now, sometimes the word worth comes in, like, gosh, it was me. Why did I do this? Why am I this? So now it's getting to the point where I have to kind of start turning around and to make this short, because when I coach for several months at a time. So we're trying to put this into, like 15 or 20 minutes. There's a lot more involved, just FYI.
Sure. Fair enough. And
even in my book, Seen and Unheard, I break down some things. But one of the things I too encourage people to do, which builds confidence, is to celebrate and reward themselves when they've done something accountable to. In other words, like say they took a baby step to do something and they held themselves accountable for it, no matter what it might be. It might be a goal they got to, maybe they lost a pound, maybe they took the effort to reach out to somebody to talk to about maybe some different things, something that was in there that they felt they needed to do. When you do that, you reward yourself and celebrate yourself, because what that does, it starts to build confidence in your own worth. And when you start feeling more confidence, you start feeling more accountability. It all works together, because when you feel more worthy, you start feeling more confidence, especially when you can reach those little miniature goals. And I also really highly recommend people just create micro goals. Like, for instance, a lot of people do weight loss and they say, I'm going to lose 50 pounds. Really what you need to do is you take 5 pounds or even 2.5 pounds, and you just make 1 pound. I'm going to lose a pound, and I'm going to celebrate myself, and I'm going to go out for a great walk, or I'm going to do a dance, or we just have to acknowledge that we've done well, because we can't always rely on other people to celebrate us and also to hold us accountable, because we have to learn to be accountable to ourselves.
Right. True.
Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah. And it's not as easy as it sounds, but one baby step at a time, and celebration and rewarding yourself is key.
Fair enough. Wonderful discussion, and no more excuses. And this journey that you are coaching your clients on and helping them to understand what their responsibility is, their accountability is so very important. So once again, Patricia, thank you for joining us on the Success Insight podcast. We're very excited for the material that we are sharing and you're sharing with us and our listeners. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Fantastic. Now, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, where are the best places for them to go?
The best and the easiest places are, first off, go to patricialove.com. Or you go if you're on Facebook regularly, go to Patricia Love, the Rah Rah Coach. And on Instagram, I am Coach Patricia Love. And I'd love to talk to somebody. You can also get my book there, Seen and Unheard. That's it. So easy to get me.
Fantastic. Well, folks, we've just been chatting with Patricia Love. She is our women's empowerment coach and the author of Seen and Unheard, A Little Girl's Journey from Silence to Empowerment. And as you have experienced today, Patricia is sharing her secrets, her pitfalls, triumphs along her journey in hopes of inspiring her readers, young women and women of all ages for that matter, to choose themselves and realize that they too can have it all. In today's episode, we kind of unpack the idea of no more excuses and introducing this term accountability into your daily practice. So a very powerful segment today. If you enjoyed today's podcast, do let us know at successinsightpodcast.com. Please leave a comment if you're inclined. You can also find us on LinkedIn and Facebook on our Success Insight podcast pages, and also on the major podcast platforms, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and you can even find us on YouTube. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we look forward to having you join us again. We have one more episode coming up with Patricia, and we're very excited, and it's been a great series with her. Until then, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there and have a phenomenal day. Take care of yourselves, your family, practice social distancing, continue to wear your mask, and we will see you on the next episode of the Success Insight Podcast. Take care now.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.